the storm, riders on the storm. Into this house we're born, into this world we're thrown, like a dog without a bone, an actor out alone. Riders on the storm, there's a killer on the road, his brain is squirming like a toad.
Hello, everybody. Today we have Bill back again for his third interview, which is really great. So thank you, Bill, for doing that, taking your time.
Sure.
Now, you and I were just talking off air, and I'd like to just touch on this, that not only did you serve with John, who I've also interviewed, but you also served with Francis, or you went in his back seat as a Covey rider. Would that be the correct?
No, I was as a 1-0
Okay.
Recon and LZs for a future mission.
Yeah. So I just wanted to let the people know that there is kind of a tie-in between all three of you, which is cool. I'm trying to stick to only a few guys at one time, and so you can tell your stories to as much as or your history as much as you would like. So again, you've been gracious enough to give me a list of your missions and those kind of things. So thank you. That really helps me out. Now, this is the one, and you said it's basically 3 stories in one. This is the Sapper attack on FOB2. I didn't really know about that, and as I was telling you that everybody or most people know about the FOB4 Sapper attack, you know. So could we start off with that today?
Sure. Unlike the Sapper attack in FOB4, there was a lot of casualties there. And fortunately at FOB2, it was not so many. But to kind of give you a little bit of background, when I first got to FOB2, the 4th Infantry Division was in the area, and they were around Khartoum. They were securing Khartoum and also the highway that went down to Pleiku. They had these APCs and these 30mm Vulcans all along that highway. So we had basically a freedom of movement in the area that we lived, which was really nice. We didn't have to worry a lot about security there at the FOB. But in early 1970, I don't remember exactly when, they pulled the 4th Infantry Division back all the way to Pleiku. And shortly after that, we started seeing activity around the Khartoum area, and not so much at the FOB, but downtown Khartoum started getting rockets in their mortars on a frequent basis. And the only Americans that were in Khartoum at that time, there was a Special Forces B team that was located down there by the airstrip. So all of a sudden we went from a fairly secure environment where we lived to one that wasn't quite so secure. And so what happened on April Fool's Day, 1970, April 1st, we had this Sapper attack, and they clearly had an inside guy or guys because they knew exactly where the buildings were in the compound. They knew how to get in. There was a series of drainage ditches that exited out under the wire on the village side of the compound. And that's where they had entered. They came in that night in that drainage ditch, and they crawled in the drainage ditch to several different locations within the FOB where they did their dastardly deed. But they had excellent planning except for one thing. They had thrown a lot of satchel charges into the Hatchet Force Company billets. And what they didn't know was that Hatchet Force was deployed. So the only personnel that were in those buildings were the sick, lame, and lazy guys that were the stay-behinds. and it was just a handful of them. And so they had some injuries there. There may have been a couple of them killed. I really can't remember for sure, because just wasn't that closely associated with the hatchet force. But it was chaos that night. I personally was not there. I was in Bangkok on stand down. I got back the next day. And but from what I understand, it was just total chaos, because I guess at first everybody thought it was incoming rounds as these satchel charges started going off, but turns out it wasn't incoming. But normally, if we had incoming rounds, you grab your gear and you run out, and you had an assigned bunker that you went to on the outside bunker line there. And so everybody started doing that, and then they realized that this was an inside job. And then in the middle of the night, it's really hard to distinguish who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, you know. So it was, I'm sure, very hectic there during that time. But the first satchel charge went off, blew up the TOC. And at the time, our TOC, the Tactical Operations Center, was in a building that was above ground. And in one corner of that building was the commander's office, quarters, not his office, his quarters. And it just so turns out that Colonel McGowan was at FOB2 for his first day of command. Colonel App had just left. And so this was a welcome to Colonel McGowan to FOB2. Let me blow your house up, you know. And so the TOC was pretty much destroyed. And so we were, you know, kind of in a bind there. We didn't have a place to operate out of like we'd been accustomed to. So somebody, and I don't know who, contacted the 4th Infantry Division, told them of our plight, and they agreed that they would send a platoon of engineers up to FOB2 and build us a new TOC if we could provide the materials. And so that sounded like a really good deal to us. Of course, we didn't have any materials.
Yeah.
And so the Recon Company First Sergeant, and we were talking, and he knew that I had been to Da Nang before and had met a couple of guys up there at the Naval Advisory Detachment. And of course, Da Nang was a huge logistics place, you know, there all kinds of logistical places there. So I told him, yeah, I'll go to Da Nang and see if I can scrounge up some lumber. And so I did. Next day I flew up on a Blackbird, and so I went over to this, there was a huge lumber yard there. I mean, it covered several acres of ground. It was just massive. And there were pallets and pallets, hundreds of pallets of lumber. I mean, 2x12 by 16, 4x4, 6x6, just all kinds of heavy lumber, which is exactly what we needed. And so I went to the office there and told them of our dilemma, that we needed to rebuild a TOC, and the clerk, of course, he wanted paperwork. I said, well, I don't have any paperwork. I'm here begging. We need some lumber, man. We got to rebuild, you know. And but he wasn't getting up off of any wood for us. So the Navy SEALs had a little club there in that compound. On a side note, I got to tell you this little story. They had a Quonset hut, and they got rations every day for the entire SEAL team that was there assigned. And but most of the SEALs were deployed down south in the Mekong Delta, so they had this abundance of food that, you know, didn't know what to do with. So they decided they would open up a club, and they would serve the Black Shoe Navy, the guys off the ships. When they come ashore, they'd have a place to get American food, because there weren't, you know, there was not an abundance of American food available in Vietnam. So anyway, I went over to the SEALs club and met some of them, the guys, and was talking about our, you know, efforts to try to get some lumber. And one of the guys said, hey, he said, you need some help getting some lumber? I said, yeah. And I thought he might know somebody over there, you know. He said, come on. So we went out and we got this truck and a 5-ton wrecker, and went over to this big lumber yard And we lifted pallets of wood over the fence with this wrecker and loaded up the truck. And so we got all the materials that we needed, and he took it out to the airport the next morning. We loaded it on a Blackbird with forklifts, and so we had our lumber to build the TOC. And so we got back to Khartoum, and the engineers worked about a month or 5 weeks, something like that, and they built us an underground TOC, a really nice facility. And so when they finished that, we to show our thanks, we gave them a party, and that is when we cooked Frank T. If you remember the story about Frank T. Well, that's when we cooked Frank T. to celebrate the 4th Engineers. And so I did get a little drunk out that night, and there was one of the guys there. I don't even know his name. We called him Weird Harold, and that's all I ever knew him known about was Weird Harold. But Weird Harold got pretty drunk, and one of the engineers, a young Spec 4 PFC, whatever, they really didn't like their platoon sergeant, and so he was telling Weird Harold about, if I had the stuff, I'd frag this guy. I could get rid of him, and whatever. So Weird Harold took him over to his team room and said, "Let me introduce you to a Claymore here." And so they're both drunk. They're sitting in the floor, and they got this Claymore sitting between their legs. And Weird Harold tells him, said, "All you got to do, put this blasting cap, screw it in right here. And when you get ready, you plug it into this clacker. And then all you got to do is just squeeze that clacker." When he did, it blew right there. And so the Claymore was sitting right between them, between their legs. And it was laying on the floor, so that the blast went up. And it blew the roof up, and then the roof collapsed down on top of them. This team room was right next door to my team room. And we were prepping for a mission, so we were kind of uptight anyway. And that thing went off. Of course, again, we thought it was incoming, and grabbed our stuff and headed out the door. And we could hear somebody, screaming over there. They needed help or whatever. So I go over there, and here's this team room. I thought they took a direct hit with a mortar or something, because the whole roof caved in and all. And it was them 2 guys, drunker and skunks. But anyway, we got them out of there. Their legs were pretty messed up just from the concussion. But fortunately, most of the blast, like I say, went straight up. I think Weird Harold had a pellet up under his eyelid there, and maybe a couple of more, but not hardly any shrapnel wounds, just blast effect. I'm sure their ears were ringing pretty good, but so he was going to help the guy out and teach him how to frag his platoon sergeant, but didn't go so good.
I mean, that's amazing that they didn't get their man parts blown off or their legs. I mean, that's it just shows you that no matter who you are, alcohol and playing with explosives or firearms is not a good idea, right?
Does not mix, yeah.
So now one of these, you actually told me quite a funny story last night about the CS powder in the insect bottles, the insect repellent, repellent bottles. So can we tell that one?
Sure. One of the things that we had ready access to was CS powder, and sometimes on particular missions we would take a canteen full of CS powder and place it next to a Claymore when we set up our perimeters. But at any rate, CS powder came in 8-pound bags. And we used to take insect repellent bottles. I think it's maybe a 2-ounce bottle, a little plastic bottle of insect repellent. And we'd take the top out and pour out the insect repellent and clean out the bottle really good and dry it out. And then we would put CS powder, about a half a bottle full. And you could take that little plastic bottle in and just squeeze it, and it would shoot dose of CS powder in someone's face. So it was our little downtown sidearm. If it was a place where you're not supposed to have your weapons with you, whatever, you had some protection in case you needed to break contact with somebody. So everybody had these little things just carry in their pocket when we went downtown. And so we were getting ready for a target, and a new guy came to the compound, and he was assigned to the team, and but we didn't take him with us on the mission because he just got there, and we were already prepped, with other people. But on the day he got there, we took him over to S4 to draw all of his gear, and we were showing him how to set up his web gear and everything and all that. And so we told him about the insect repellent bottles, and said, this is something you may want to do. So the next day we went on a target, and we got back, we heard the story. But apparently he took a army blanket and laid it out on his bed, put on his protective mask and his gloves like he's supposed to, and he got his bottles ready. He was making several bottles of this stuff, and so he was pouring the CS powder into the insect repellent bottles, and he spilled quite a bit on this blanket as he was doing that. Well, he was aware, it's CS powder. I got to be careful handling this stuff. So he had his mask on, his gloves and everything. So when he finished, he cleaned off the bottles, wiped them off and everything, put the CS powder up and all that. And then he gathered up that army blanket and went outside the team room and shook it out and gassed about half the compound with CS powder. So he wasn't thinking too good, but turns out he didn't come to the team after that, but it was he created a little bit of havoc there in the compound.
Oh, I'm sure that they weren't too keen on him.
Yeah.
One question I have is that when I talked to your your teammate there, John, he told me something that was very interesting, and that was that when he was ready to go out and he was wearing his uniform, and then he would layer his gear. So his first layer of gear, he would have his Browning sidearm, and he said he had a day's food in his pant pocket and something else, and then he would put on his tactical gear. And why he said that was if he had to dump his web gear and run because he was out of ammo, he still had his sidearm. So is that something that you did as well? Or like, I guess what I'm asking is, if you lost your web gear for some bizarre reason, would you still have had stuff on you to get you through the day? Or
absolutely. There's really three layers. The first layer was your clothing and things that you carried on your clothing. Some guys carried a sidearm, some guys didn't. But that would be one thing. The other thing is you always had your survival gear. Okay. We, on the teams, we had either an ERT-10 or a PRC-90 survival radio. And it was on the Guard Freak. So you could just talk to Covey, is basically who you could talk to. But it was a small, little smaller than a cell phone, a little thicker. So that went into a shirt pocket so that you'd always have it. Other shirt pocket was a signal mirror and a panel that you could use to signal aircraft. Some guys carried pin flare guns, but your basic survival stuff, knife, that kind of stuff. So that was your first layer. The second layer is, of course, your web gear with all of your ammo, grenades, and all that stuff. And then the third layer would be your rucksack. And normally the only thing that went into your rucksack was a poncho, 2 canteens of water, and then any grenades. We took a Claymore bag and sewed it on the flap of the rucksack so that the guy behind you could just reach up and grab that Claymore out of your bag and deploy it. Some teams carried that Claymore with time pencils so they could set it on their back trail if they had trackers or were in pursuit, someone was in pursuit. But anyway, that was really accessible. Some people carried their Willie Pete inside of a rucksack because it was more protected there. And then you had, 3 or 4 meals that was in there. But the rucksack was non-essential stuff. So if you got in a firefight and you were trying to run, you could actually drop that thing and keep moving. It's hard for me to imagine a situation where I would take off my web gear. I mean, we slept with it. It just stayed on all the time. But there could be an occasion, especially, I guess, if you were wounded or something, you might come out of it. But yeah, so we did. Sorry about that. We did dress in layers like that.
Now, the other question, if you were carrying a Claymore or a Willie Pete, but more the Claymore, and that got hit by like an AK round, would it blow up?
Well, the AK, I mean, the Claymore would not, probably. It'd be really unlikely that would happen. But the Willie Pete, understand this was a thin-skinned grenade that contained white phosphorus, and in the middle of it was a small detonator that exploded the grenade. Okay, it was just a small charge, but if anything penetrated that outer shell, which, like I said, was just thin layer, that Willie Pete, as soon as it hit oxygen, it would start heating up. And as soon as it started heating, it would set off that burster portion of the grenade, and it would actually explode right on you. That's what happened to Chuck Himes.
Right.
He dropped the Willie Pete grenade, rolled off of a box of stuff he was carrying, and it cracked. And when he reached down to get it, well, by that time it had heated up and exploded. So Willie Pete it was the only thing you could use in triple canopy jungle that would go up and go through the canopy, to mark a location. Regular smoke grenades, it would just that would just lay on the ground. But it was very dangerous, and it was very heavy. In fact, we didn't even get them to the yards because they couldn't throw them out of the bursting radius of the grenade. So Willie, I mean, I've seen pictures of some guys carrying Willie Pete, on their harness. Very, very dangerous thing to do. It's not very smart. So at a minimum, we carried them inside canteen covers or with some kind of protection or somewhere it's hidden and protected, because they were so dangerous to have out like that.
Now, the one thing that the public might not know is that with Willie Pete, if it lands on you, it's not going out. It's going to continue to burn, and you're going to have to cut it out or something. Like water is not going to stop it, right?
That's true. I mean, if you got Willie Pete on your hand, if you just held your hand there, you couldn't, of course, but if you could, it would burn all the way through and drop out on the other side. It's just, yeah. Once it starts burning, that's it. It's going to burn until it burns itself out.
So one last question about gear. Did you ever take your front pockets off your jungle jacket and put them onto your shoulder area? I've seen a lot of SOG guys did that.
I think most guys that did that, they didn't take any pockets off. They just added additional pockets on their. Yeah, and you could carry, extra stuff in there, but that was pretty common. Yeah.
So I liked the story that we talked about last night, and that was your baggage, your interesting collection of stuff that you that you wanted to take on your next assignment.
Yeah, I when I got ready to leave Vietnam, I'd put in a inter-theater transfer (ITT) to go back to Thailand, and it was approved. And so I was getting close to departure, and we had ready access to virtually anything there at the FOB. don't know if anybody's mentioned this to you before, but we had a couple of Connex containers outside the S4 building. And when you came back from a mission, it was available. You could take any claymores, grenades, whatever you had, and you could just put it in the Connex, because for the next mission, you always got brand new stuff every time.
Oh, really?
And then, yeah. And then when you were going down to the yard camp for training, you just go to the Connex and there'd be 300 magazines loaded already there, claymores, whatever you needed for your training, you just get it and take it. So there was really no controls on any of that kind of stuff, is what I'm saying. So I was getting ready to go to Thailand, so I said, I should take some of this stuff with me, because it's not so readily available in Thailand, but it's good to have, And so I got a Foot Locker, and I had a extra Car 15 there in the team room, and so I put the Car 15 in there, and you never know when you need a Car 15, And I put a couple of bags of CS powder and a container full of the V40 mini grenades. I took some of those, and then a bunch of other stuff like survival mirrors and panels and a couple of poncho liners and just a lot of stuff like that. Because in my first tour in Thailand, we traded a lot of stuff like that for food, and we literally lived off of scrounging like that for a couple of years. So I knew it would be valuable to have over there. And so anyway, I packed up this Foot Locker, put some jungle fatigues and boots and other stuff in there, and put my padlock on it. And Lloyd O'Daniels was a Covey rider at the time, and he was operating a lot out of NKP in Thailand, a launch site over there. So I went to OD. I said, "Hey, man, I got a Foot Locker I want to send to Thailand." I said, "Can you take it over to NKP next time you go? And I'll pick it up at the launch site there." He said, "Sure." So I took him the Foot Locker, and he took it to Thailand. Well, when I got to Thailand, I went to Camp Pitts up in northern Thailand, and we were really, really busy. And I just never had an opportunity to go over to NKP and get this Foot Locker. And so I'd been in Thailand a couple of months, and Major Jacks was my commander at the time. He had left FOB2 and went to Thailand a little bit before I did. And he had been down in Bangkok on business and at the headquarters. And so he came back by train. And Team Sergeant went down to the downtown Pitts and picked him up at the train station and brought him back. And we were in the mess hall eating dinner. And Major Jacks come in. He said, "Hey, Spurgeon," he said, "I got your whole baggage." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I got your whole baggage. I got a Foot Locker out here with your name on it." It had my name stenciled on it, I went out there, I got that Foot Locker, and I brought it in and unlocked it and opened it up. And old Major Jackson about had a heart attack. He had no idea what he was carrying, and he gave me hell about that. But interestingly enough, it did pay off. At Camp Pitts, we were the first airstrip inside of Thailand if you were coming out of Laos. So a lot of Air America aircraft come in through there, and a lot of the CIA operators that were running camps in Laos would land at Camp Pitts on their way to Bangkok or wherever. So we had a lot of traffic that came in from those guys. And one day I was there, and plane landed, and the guy got off, and it was retired Sergeant Major Paul Payne. I'd been with him in the 6th group back at Bragg, so I knew him. And he came over, and we had some chow in the mess hall, and we had a little club there. Went to the club, and we were having a few beers and talking, and he was telling us his story about his camp out there. He was the only American in the camp. Everybody else was indig, and the weapons they had were pretty primitive. I mean, he had like M1s and stuff. His personal weapon was a 30 caliber carbine, and
wow,
Sergeant Major. how would you like to have a car 15? He said, I'd kill to have a car 15. And I said, I just happen to have one. You can have it. And so I gave him that car 15, and he was very appreciative of getting that. So I guess the whole baggage was worth doing, as it turned out.
Now here's a question, like obviously that you would have to take care of your own firearms, the cleaning of it and the maintenance, but if there was something that was broken through wear and tear, would you be issued a new one? And if so, where would you go?
Yeah, S4 would just give you another weapon. I'm sure that they had a mechanism for small arms repair, but it wasn't local. I mean, there were, if you had a busted hand grip or something, they could replace that, or maybe even a busted stock, they could replace that. But certainly couldn't do any kind of machine work or anything like that. So yeah, there was an abundance of stuff like that available. So they would just give you another one, and that would be it.
So it would be up to the individual soldier to ensure that his weapon would be cleaned and ready to go for the next mission.
That was the 1-0's responsibility, to make sure everybody was locked down with all their equipment. Yeah.
Now with the yards or the indigenous guys, I mean, I'm sure that maybe they just wouldn't quite understand the actual maintenance aspect of weapons. So would you, more than just saying, hey, did you clean your weapon, is it good to go, would you ever inspect it to make sure?
Yes, but you didn't have to worry much about that. They were very attentive to things like that. They understood why that was important, so it was never an issue.
And now with the yards, like, would they, if they had a problem with one of their own, and I'm sure that I know that Nungs didn't get along with the yards and et cetera, but if they had their own issues, say if there was a guy who was cheating on another man's wife or whatever, would they deal with that internally and the guy might go missing? Or like, were there fights in-house with the yard team members at times?
There were occasionally, but as Americans, we didn't get involved in that too much. That was kind of their deal. And, they had their own little chain of command within their units, and they dealt with that. So we didn't think that was a good practice for us to get involved in any kind of internal issues with them.
And even, how about if one of your Indig team members said, look, I don't think it's a good idea that this guy comes along with us, would you then get involved?
If that was my 01, I took his word 100%. If he had a recommendation, I did not question it.
Okay. And so if you have a new guy come to your team, let's say a new American, that must be quite a nervy thing to have a new guy. You don't even know this person and suddenly he's new to your team. Would you do like an easier run first to get to know this guy, to see how he is in the jungle or in the woods, as you guys say it?
I don't think I really ever had that option. I don't recall ever being able to select a target. I only was given the option to accept or deny, and there was I don't even know how to explain this, but it was kind of a given at the FOB that if you were on a target and you were going to a launch site, and for some reason, if you felt it just shouldn't happen today, that was okay.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if you would just call it people's intuition or whatever, but you had that choice to make, as a team leader. If you didn't feel like everything was right, if you didn't feel like you were prepared or whatever, you had the option to say, nope, we can't go today. We'll go tomorrow or whatever.
Wow. And now, how about if you had an issue with one of the U.S. guys on your team? Would you deal with one of them, privately, or it stays between you and the team, or would you have to go to the commander to say this guy was caught drinking, or he was not attentive when we were in the woods? Is that something that you would deal with, like on your own?
Yeah, I think so. I had a situation one time where I had a guy that was going to strap hang on a mission with us. And the night before we were supposed to insert, I was in my team room, working on my gear and whatever. And a guy came in and he laid a couple of joints down on the table there. And he said, give this to so-and-so. And I said, okay. And so when so-and-so came to pick these up, I told him he would not be deploying with us tomorrow. And he wanted to go, but I said I can't take that chance, brother.
Yeah.
And it ended right there. Today we're still the best of friends, but he did not go on the mission.
So it seems like, all of us who are, history, the interest of SOG history, we all expect there to be these harsh rules, which I don't doubt that there were. But it seems like due to what you guys were doing, that there was a little bit of slack where, you dealt with something there. You didn't have to go to a higher chain of command. You weren't going to get questioned, or like you just told us, that if you had a gut feeling today's not a good day, I just feel like, I can feel the vibe. It's just not good. It's nice to hear that you weren't forced to go on there. Spurgeon, I don't care. I don't give a crap. You guys are going out there. You're going to deploy. You're going to, so it's nice to hear.
It was good. And the other thing is, it's kind of funny, but in Vietnam, a lot of the KIAs that happened within the first 30 days of arriving in Vietnam or in the last 30 days.
Mm.
So it was very common in Recon Company that a month or even 2 months before the end of your tour, that you would stop running targets. And it was never questioned. It was just, okay, you can go work in the TOC, you can help out in the orderly house, or go work in S4 or whatever. So, and nobody looked down on anybody for doing that. It was just a smart thing, because so many people got killed in their last, month and a half there, that it was a good time to stop running. And when you felt that, you better listen to yourself in that inner voice that says, you're done. Yeah, that's enough. And
so on that note, do you feel that either one of two things happened? That they were mentally winding down, they were thinking about their date when they're going to go home, so their focus wasn't on point? Or was it just that you've rolled the dice that many times, you've done what you were asked to do, don't keep rolling that dice because you are going to lose?
I think it's the roll of dice thing. When you're in a unit that had 100% casualties, if you've been running recon for 10 months and you're still walking and alive and kicking, maybe that's enough. Now, some guys ran 18 months or 2 years, and they were very fortunate, very blessed if they're still alive. But like I say, it was not looked down upon if you decided, okay, that's enough, I'm done. That was okay, and then get somebody else.
And so when you left SOG and you went to Thailand, your activities that you were doing there, was it just as intense, or it was a little, not, these aren't the best words to try and explain what I'm trying to say, is, was Thailand easier for you after SOG and not so intense as SOG, or was it more dangerous? Or
No, it it was much less intense. I don't think there's anywhere in the world as intense as SOG. But no, when I went back to Thailand at Camp Pitts, it was a training mission, and you know, we were working with the guys in Laos, and I actually flew resupply drops with Harry Monk out there in a Platus Porter kicking bundles to some of these camps and stuff like that. But we were in a training mode there. We were training little people for deployment there. So it was significantly different. The area we were at, there's always the potential of a CT, communist terrorist attack, because they were in the area, no doubt. But it was a much safer environment there than it was in Nam.
So during your time in SOG, I know the answer to this, but were you ever shot?
The only time I was ever shot, I think I told you this story. We were coming out on streams one time, and we just got up above the canopy and started moving forward, and I got hit in the foot, right in the heel, and I thought, oh my God, and it was really, really painful. And so we flew for, I don't remember, half hour, 45 minutes back to the launch site. And, you know, when you're in a McGuire rig or stable rig, whatever, you know, your circulation's cut off to your legs, basically. So when you first land, you can hardly walk, if you can walk at all. And so we landed back at Dak To at the launch site. I got out of the rig, and I just knew my foot was just mangled. I mean, it hurt like hell. And so I hobbled over there to the where the launch site was, and sat down on an army cot and took off my jungle boot. And I was fully expecting that boot to be full of blood and whatever. And I took the boot off, and my sock was dry. I said, what the hell? I took my sock off, and I had this big bruise on the bottom of my foot. And I thought, what in the hell? And so I picked up my jungle boot and turned it upside down, and there was an AK round lodged in the heel of the boot. It was barely visible. It was just almost flush with the top of the heel there. And so I guess we were high enough that round was, almost expended by the time it hit my foot, and it didn't have enough power to go ahead and penetrate that jungle boot. I guess if it would have hit the jungle boot in any other place except the heel, it probably would have went through, but it didn't. But that's, I got shrapnel in my butt. Actually, our first target with RT Texas, we'd been moving, and in fact, there's a little story I'll tell you quickly about that. This was the first time with our yards on the ground. It's me and Yamura, and so we picked up some trackers, and we moved to our extraction LZ, and I called Covey. I said, okay, we got some trackers that we need to take care of before we bring in slicks, So he said, okay, I got some spads here. I'm gonna bring in. He said, I need you to mark your location. So we could see Covey up there, and so we threw a Willie Pete, we were in a bomb crater, a new bomb crater, and it was kind of soft mud. And so through the Willie Pete, and white smoke went up, and so the spads were going to come in and mark us, So the first spad rolled in, and he came down and came right over us, and he said, bingo, bingo, I got you. And he rolled away, and the second spad came in hot and dropped CBU 25 on us. I mean, right on the white smoke, And so all of a sudden, all these bomblets going off, and me and Yamura were laying side by side, and had the radio laying on the ground there between us. And one of those bomblets came right in and went right down in the mud under the radio and blew up, and it blew the radio up. And I got shrapnel in my butt, but that was the only injury that actually had while I was there.
Wow.
But, so
Now,
for the next couple of years, I had little pieces of shrapnel floating out. I'd be picking them out. But yeah, it was pretty minor. And compared to a lot of guys, I was very blessed. Yeah.
now, I'm sure that there are thousands of people out there who have seen these videos, interviews, and wondered what you have behind you on the wall. So I know it's going to be hard for you to turn around, and so I'm going to describe them the best that I can. And
Okay.
behind you have the Ranger 1974 on your graduate. So obviously that was after Vietnam, and that was the only, you told me that was the only break that you had throughout your special forces career, correct?
Oh, that was later. That was just
Okay.
Ranger school. I later in my career, 1979 to 1981, I was in the 2nd Ranger Battalion
Okay.
at Fort. Yeah, but and that was the only time I was not in a SF billet.
Okay, so below that there is a shield, a plaque, and is that a knife on there? It would be behind your.
Yes, that was actually awarded to the distinguished graduate at Ranger School. It's the V2 stiletto, but it's of course an imitation of the V2, but that's what that is.
Okay.
And then the Gerber Mark II in the little shadow box, if you can see that, that was a gift I was given when I left the Ranger Battalion.
Nice.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's my CNC plaque,
Right.
that I cherish that thing. And the other ones are just, awards from schools and stuff. And if you can see the one that's kind of got a green background.
Yep.
That's my Indonesian Halo award there. Actually went to Halo school per se in Indonesia when I was there. That's another story I'll have to tell you sometime. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, this is my I Love Me room, so I got all kind of stuff on the walls.
Now I know that we're not going to go down this road because I know that you don't really like to bring attention to yourself, but the black and white picture, you were being awarded something.
The Silver Star, yeah.
Yeah. So another day that we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Because like I said, I know that you don't really like to have that kind of attention on yourself, but that's quite the award.
Let me just talk about that a minute.
Sure.
Because I was fortunate to get the Silver Star and be awarded that. There were a lot of guys at FOB2 who were very deserving of Bronze Stars, Silver Stars, or whatever, and never got it because the system was, the only guys on the ground, the eyewitnesses, were you and your 1-1, 1-2. I mean, that was it. So when you came back off a target, the only way you got an award was if you rode each other up. Okay. And it seemed kind of weird to write each other up for an award. And so a lot of guys just didn't do that. And consequently, the people in S3, I guess they could have written up the awards and probably did write up some, but they weren't on the ground and they were so damn busy. They were on to the next target. I mean, it was a really fast moving train over there. So I think, and a good example, you and I, we talked about that bright light I went on. I was probably more deserving of an award on that mission than when I actually got this Silver Star, but there were no shots fired. But I mean, we went into Laos in a single slick with 2 M60 machine guns, and there was no covey, there was no aircraft, there's nothing. There was me and Ray Harris and the guys that flying that slick, and we went out there twice in one day on a downed aircraft. So at the very least, probably should have been a soldier's medal, if nothing else. I mean, because we did rescue a guy, but
You okay?
Yeah, my phone just went blank. It said low battery.
Okay.
But yeah, so a lot of guys did not get awards that really earned them, should have been awarded. It's just the system wasn't really conducive to that, you know.
So you have kind of mixed feelings about the whole thing, that you personally witnessed many men that should have got.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How much time?
The guys there, it wasn't a big deal then. You know, it was just not a big deal to us at the time. But later in life, those things become important to you, you know, and it's unfortunate because, like I say, there were a lot of guys that deserved awards and didn't get them simply because of the system.
How much time does your phone have on it? Because you were saying that it's flashing there.
Yeah, I'm about to go bone dry here, I think.
Okay. Well, what we can do is I'd rather end it on our power than your phone's power, you know, halfway through a story and it just goes, bloop, you know, so for today, let's end it there. And I thank you again for, you know, especially talking about the Silver Star. There's lots of things that people have no idea about, and just how soldiers feel about getting a medal, and, you know, what you just said. So there's a lot of, and I'll be very cautious when I say this, and I'm going off the information that I've been told by other veterans. There were some individuals that sent in forms from their own hand, and that were embellished, and they were awarded, you know, and that, yeah, I'm not going to say anything more about that. That should not be talked about. I'm just saying that it did happen, and I know that quite a few of you saw guys have told me about this one person. So
yeah.
Anyway, Bill, thank you very much yet again for spending the time with us. You've got a lot of stories that we didn't cover, so maybe after Christmas we can do the final not the final chapter, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
the ones that your phone didn't allow us to talk about.
that sounds like a plan. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Riders on the storm, into this house we're born, into this world we're thrown, like a dog without a bone, an actor out alone. Riders on the storm, there's a killer